Okay, so good evening from me. It's 7:30 in the evening or thereabouts, UK time right now, my time. And I just want to say a big thank you for all the new subscribers. Thank you very much. Welcome. Obviously, if you're new to the live stream chat, so if you're a new subscriber, bear that in mind. If you are watching and want to subscribe, you have to be subscribed for about 20 minutes. This is designed to give the moderators a bit of a break and keep the idiots out of the live stream chat because many a live stream has been ruined over the years with the idiots in the chat causing problems. Right, now that's that bit housekeeping done. So welcome aboard all those newbies. Now, the rugby league history videos that I've been doing the last couple of days have actually been quite a lot of fun. And uh, enjoyable. I'm really surprised with some of the information I found out about the history of rugby league in both the US and Canada. And yeah, it was a real eye opener when I was doing the research. Considering, obviously, the other day I did my mental health and addiction video, and I felt that was important to do. I should have done it a lot sooner, I believe. I think I feel bad. I should have done it when I was in 2021 when I had my motorcycle accident. Really, I think that was the moment I should have really done it, having gone through all the health issues I did a year and a half ago, and I feel bad that I didn't. But there's other reasons why I decided no, now's the time to do it. It's that time of year where people struggle. There's a lot in the news lately in regards to high profile athletes who've had issues of various natures that I was discussing. So I thought it made a lot of sense. Dan, sorry that I haven't actually video called you last night, but to be brutally honest, it's cold here. I'm tired, and I've got more time off work. I've got my annual leave to use up next week. But no, obviously we've had a lot of new subscribers to the channel in recent days, hence why the hair's all been shaved off. My head is really cold. Now, obviously, in the UK, when we discuss weather temperatures, we work in Celsius. In the US, they work in Fahrenheit. At the moment, it's about -1, -2 degrees Celsius. So it's not particularly warm outside. In fact, it hasn't been particularly warm outside for about a week. So it's basically, as soon as I cut my hair off, the temperature plummets. Overnight, it's been hitting what -7 to -11 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that actually is in Fahrenheit. I know -4 Fahrenheit equals -4 Celsius. So it's been cold. And the ground is frozen solid. We had a women's Super League match between Chelsea and Liverpool that kicked off with a frozen pitch, and they abandoned it after 6 minutes of play. Chelsea were the home side, Liverpool were the away side. There's been much discussion about that in the media over lunchtime today. There was no way that pitch was going to be defrosted by the time they decided to kick. They kept the kickoff time the same. They did a pitch inspection in the morning. That didn't work. Pitch inspection said it was fine when clearly it wasn't, and they didn't delay the kickoff, which was the intended plan. Earlier this morning, they kicked off at the lunchtime kickoff, and 6 minutes in, no, it was actually at the AFC Wimbledon, I believe. Chelsea women's team share facilities with the AFC Wimbledon football club in southwest London, and obviously AFC Wimbledon were playing away this weekend. Otherwise, their match would have been cancelled. There's been a lot of cancellations and postponements over the last couple of weeks because before we had this cold spell, we've basically had a month of constant rain and a bit of sleet and snow in there. It has snowed as well in places, but we've had a real bad spell of wet weather. And there's been flooding. There's been obviously waterlogged pitches. Then temperatures plummet, and those waterlogged pitches turn to ice rinks. You could play ice hockey on them. You couldn't play football or rugby union or rugby league, but you could play ice hockey on them. And so the weather conditions the last month have been dreadful. We had a cold spell about a month and a half ago, a month ago. Then it warmed up. We've had a very mild, but a lot of it's just rained all the time. It's almost rained constantly. It's only been in the last few days we've had this secondary cold spell. Well, yeah, second cold spell of the winter, which has lasted more than a day or two of a bit of frost at night, where it's stopped raining. Yeah, it's not been great weather. There's many funny videos on the internet of pitch inspections, which it doesn't take a genius to work out the match is not being played across the UK, predominantly in lower league stadiums which don't have a good and grassroots level, a semi-professional level kind of we're talking about here, where the drainage isn't good or there isn't the facilities for undersoil heating or putting the covers over the pitch to keep the snow or the rain off to protect the pitch as much as possible. There have been postponements and cancellations all over the place. Now, Plough Lane, which is AFC Wimbledon's ground, is a modern stadium. It's recently been refurbed and reopened. They don't have undersoil heating, um, but it it's not a good look when if that's the men's game, that game doesn't get played. So there's clearly double standards at play. It's a bit of a shambles. Obviously, we've seen the reaction to in certain aspects. There's a minority of sports fans who think that this there's a forced diversity agenda. And whether we should have played the game at Stamford Bridge or not, yes. But Chelsea were away at Liverpool in the men's equivalent fixture, so Stamford Bridge was available. But Stamford Bridge, as a football surface, as a playing surface, does tend to cut up quite badly, at least historically. And with the amount of rain we've had with this cold spell, um, you want to try and reduce the amount of abuse the surface has to um, undergo. I think that's fair. Um, Craven Cottage, just down the road from Stamford Bridge, is another stadium that's had issues with the surface over the years. Now, I do believe a lot of investment's gone into these stadiums with undersoil heating and protective covers, better drainage, new playing surfaces. Old Trafford was another one that used to historically be quite a bad playing surface for well, Old Trafford. I mean, think of it. Historically, used to get worn out quite badly. So there's several stadiums with a playing surface that you would think the club would have a better playing surface, and they don't with the amount of money. So a lot of clubs have spent a lot of money installing undersoil heating and installing like over grass covers that you would normally see on a cricket pitch. Those hovercraft covers keep the rain off with heating underneath. A lot of high profile clubs have done that, but not every club can afford that kind of groundskeeping work and that kind of technology and investment that certain clubs can. But we're going to see what happens. Other news: if you are an NHL fan, the Vancouver Canucks, literally within the last 2 hours, have sacked Bruce Boudreau, which we knew was going to happen a week ago, and they brought in and hired Rick Tocchet, which we knew was going to happen a week ago. So the worst kept secret in the NHL has occurred. The way the Vancouver Canucks, as an organisation, have handled it has been possibly the worst I have seen in recent years. They're not the only organisation or sports team that have done it this way historically, but you could definitely see the fans. When you have ownership and a management structure that is, not well liked, and there's that disconnect with the fan base and the ownership. Now, the team may be good or bad; it's irrelevant how the team's doing. But when decisions are made and there's a clear disconnect, and it's very obvious there's that disconnect, you can see it. And the Canucks fans are known to be one of the more vocal fan bases. Um, they can be a very divisive fan base. In this case, the fan base is united behind the coach and to a certain extent behind the team. They're not very happy with team management and they're not very happy with the Aquilini family, the owners. And I see parallels with the current Canucks management structures and ownership that I see with Manchester United, with the fan base and the Glazer family. That we're starting to see at Chelsea with Todd Bowley and the Chelsea fan base, or sections of the Chelsea fan base. And we have seen with some sections, well, look at the Everton fan base and their ownership. So we've seen it in English football. We've seen it in other sports as well. We've seen it with the West Tigers fans in the NRL, with their management structure, their chairman, their board, and the fans. We've seen it with the Manly Sea Eagles. Um, and there's various things. What would you do with Brock Besser? I think Bo Horvat's more likely to get traded. Some of these contracts that have been signed by Jim Benning are problematic. Um, and but you look at the Canucks. They last were a conversation in the conversation for Stanley Cup under Alan Vigneault. They haven't been relevant since Mark Crawford and Alan Vigneault were the two head coaches. If you know what I mean. Um, the Canucks have been in the playoffs twice in a decade. They've got a shocking record. They have not been a decent team for a long time. And you could definitely argue Willie Desjardins overachieved with the team, and that unfortunately, since him, the team has gone backwards. The Tortorella experiment is the moment that I think the team needed to check. Really didn't. That's the GM. That's the management structure. Didn't make the moves necessary to I wouldn't say rebuild. I hate that term, but constantly freshen up the playing squad, the roster. All they had to do was a certain few moves, and they didn't. Um, it's best of the player you try. I mean, there's several bad contracts. There's big talk about Bo Horvat being traded constantly. He's the heart and soul of that team. There's question marks over the drafting and their policy of trades and free agent signings. But this is a team where over half the coaches in the team's history have survived 2 seasons or less. This is a team which has averaged. I'll have to look at the stats, but I was watching the Hockey Guys video on it, and it basically works out that in in the time the team has been in the league, which is 50 years or 50 seasons, should I say, they've had 22 coaches. That's a coach every 2.5 years or something ridiculous. Yeah, pretty much. So they don't have that stability on the bench. They don't have that stability in head office. If is Chelsea spending so much in one window on modern players going to hurt them in the long run? It depends if they then are in breach of the financial fair play rules that are currently in place. And bearing in mind, Graham Potter's under a lot of pressure, and you've got a new owner. But then Todd Bowley, when he came in the at the end of last season and was officially allowed to sign players and all that. Tuchel was starting to spend a bit of money as well, so there's a lot of new faces that have come in the last 6 months into the club. There's been a managerial change. There's been ownership change. There's definitely there are players who are a bit out of form. There's new players in. There's some injuries. We'll see what happens. But whether they're spending too much, I think with the Murdick transfer, Arsenal have been interested in that player for 6 months to a year. There have been lengthy discussions, obviously, about term, contract, bonuses, signing bonuses, performance bonuses. There have been various discussions. They were obviously waiting either for the value to come down or try and get him on a free as a free transfer. Chelsea come in, and whether it was one of them. It was one of them. Do I think this is the season where Everton get relegated? It's highly likely. Whether they sack Lampard or not is irrelevant. I think this is 25 years of mismanagement at board level. They've only had two managers in that time that have really given the team fight since they last had a trophy, and that's Joe Royle and David Moyes. They've been in two other relegation scraps in that time, where they've survived literally in the last day or the last week of the season. They've only, in my lifetime, uh, they've won one trophy and been to one other cup final. So there are problems with the organisation. There has been for some time. This is not new issues. I think Lampard is the wrong guy for the job. I'm not saying Lampard's a terrible manager. He's a young manager who's learning his craft. I think because there's there's no patience. There's no patience to build something. There's no patience. But he was not the guy to come in to fix the problems that the team had. Rafa Benitez wasn't the guy. Rafa Benitez, successful manager. Ancelotti was only there for it. They are just all over the place. There's no direction. They're misspending money. Their scouting's gone down the toilet. Their youth development's gone down the toilet. The new stadium comes with baggage anyway. It's become a political issue in the city of Liverpool, and it's caused problems there. Um, Wolves, Forest, West Ham. Well, it's an interesting one. That one, I don't know. Whoever goes down, I think it's such a difficult league to get out of the Championship. We'll see what happens. But Everton, I think, are the ones who, if they go down, won't come back anytime soon. There will be chaos. Juventus actually got deducted 15 points. They're appealing that deduction, although they are still under investigation by the trade competitiveness of the Office of Trade Competitiveness, or whatever you want to call it in Italy. There's another investigation ongoing. They're not the only club involved in this scandal. They're the centerpiece of the scandal. So they've been cooking the books basically, and giving false numbers over transfer fees and how much it's cost, and payments and accountancy figures have been fiddled. But they're not the only club doing it. But they were so blatant in doing it that there was another problem. They're on the Italian Stock Exchange. A lot of the other clubs involved in the scandal are not on the Italian Stock Exchange. So it's harder to delve into their finances. Not impossible to hide money, but uh, Juventus really have screwed up, and because they were at the centre of the match fixing scandal 15 years ago, 16 years ago, yeah, you, this is not the first corruption scandal Juventus have been involved with. It will not, and that is a problem. Um, the gambling on foot, the Champions League football is selling off Deadwood next summer. Oh, Juventus are in trouble now. Um, they're in trouble right now. I mean, they're lucky that they haven't been thrown out of the league with basically immediate effect, um, or liquidated and had to reform. The fact that someone as high profile as Pavel Nedved within the game as an ex player and as a director of football, the current director of football at Tottenham, who Conte wanted, is implicated in this scandal. And then there's the whole rumours about Conte not wanting to resign, Spurs not wanting to resign him on a contract extension. If you don't want the manager there, sack him. So Spurs have are linked to this because of the manager and the director of football that the manager wanted, but they got that director of football in before the manager was appointed. That this is all, you know, conjecture. He's implicated in it. There's been lengthy suspensions given out. There's been fines given out. There's still an investigation going on. The club itself's been fined. It's ironically, yes, Italy has got a lot of corruption within sport and a lot of corruption within industry. But when they catch you, they're actually very, very strict, and the punishments are very, very severe. And the problem is, you then have to look at some of the transfers, outgoings and incomings. And when your director of football, your current president or director of football, or director of operations, Pavel Nedved's, legend of a player, um, is involved, it doesn't look good. It then brings into question not only the integrity of one club, but I think the integrity of the whole club, of the whole system. But I wasn't aware you were talking about Chelsea. No, Chelsea are in trouble. I don't think. I think they were going backwards anyway. Tuchel, yes, he wins in the Champions League, but he won the Champions League with Lampard's team. Lampard inherited a team that had a transfer embargo. So towards the end of the Abramovich era, there were the warning signs had been there for some time, and so it's an interesting one. In regards to the Spurs situation with Fabio Patrici, they were actually fully aware that the Juventus time frame we're looking at, there was that investigation. It was public knowledge. It wasn't like it was secret or anything. It was sort of like the Saracens salary cap investigation. We sort of knew for about 4 years prior that there was things going on. It wasn't like, oh no, people within the footballing industry knew what was going on. The fact that Conte, when he turned down the initial offer by Spurs to be manager, he was already appointed as their director of football. He'd been there for about a year. Let that sink in. And Conte wanted to bring other members of the team that he had at Juventus alongside Patrici in place. I think the Spurs situation, the rumour mill, and what's been reported on the grapevine is that he's turned down a contract extension, or doesn't want to stay there, and the club don't want to give him a contract extension. If that is the case, why did they hire him in the first place and have all of the shambles about his hiring in the first place, and how they wasted 6 months when they could have got him earlier on? And so that's where their last season unravelled for them, and that's why they were playing catch up the entire season. This season, again, they've been good, they've been bad, they've been indifferent. There's been moments where they've been fantastic, moments where they've been hopeless. They have conceded more goals than Everton, and Everton are 19th. So their defensive side of things is a mess. The fact that Levy as chairman, he's pulling the money strings, even though he's not the full owner, although he has like a 25% stake, and they're courting, overseas money. The Spurs are playing a very dangerous game. Very dangerous game. But so are many other clubs playing a dangerous game. Clearly, the Juventus situation, that does actually involve a lot of other individuals at other clubs, and other clubs in general, is much wider than just Italian football. It's a fact. And this is not the first time that Conte's been implicated in corruption in Italian football. Siena, who've gone bankrupt and been reformed, they were also involved in another match fixing scandal. And it, it's more than just Italian football that these tentacles of dodgy dealings, cooking the books, lack of transparency are there. And I've been saying this now for quite some time, and I think this also applies to English football. It could apply to German. Well, German football seems to be much better run out of the European leagues than most. But look what's happening in Spanish football with the Barcelona and Real Madrid situations. Valencia are basically bankrupt constantly. So it's not just that there's clearly weak governance. There's a lack of transparency across the board, and there's a lack of there's a term for it. There's a lack of accountability, and it always seems to be someone else's problem. And the fans, some players, non-playing staff, like the ones that are behind the scenes keeping the clubs running, like the tea lady, for example, all the way through to the admin staff, the front office staff, the club shop staff, the ticket sales staff, the whole lot. The ones who are, the engine room that keeps clubs going are the ones who suffer. It's like before COVID. When this channel first started up, there was a lot of club protests, fan protests at clubs about the price of tickets in this country, in the UK. Now, I don't know what the price of tickets are overseas. I can't comment on the Bundesliga or the MLS or the South American leagues or other sports. I can't comment on ticket prices outside of the UK when it comes to sport. But what was interesting is one of the chief financial officers of one of the Premier League clubs in the 2015-2016 season. There was a review done or whatever, and one of them basically off the cuff, sort of off the record, said that they could basically let fans in for £10 or less, basically for nothing, and still make loads of money. Fast forward a few years, obviously we had the pandemic and we had no crowds allowed when play was allowed to resume, and they're losing loads of money. And they're saying, "Oh no, we need to, lay staff off or use the furlough scheme, all this kind of, oh, we're losing money, we're losing money. So what's happened in that 3, 4 year period is well, of course they were lying. It's called cooking the books. No, it's actually a skiing resort. Uh, it's not a Wolfson at all. No, it's a alpine skiing company. It's still sports stuff, but it's a skiing snud from a ski resort and one of the um, ski companies out there. I got it for nothing. I was just, it was just surplus stock that they just gave away to charity and to distribute to people, or give to street vendors. So I just got it for like nothing. But no, the the clubs basically were cooking the books. They have to be, because why would Premier League clubs, if they're making all this money off the TV deal, sponsorship deals, selling players on transfer, all that kind of thing, merchandise, why would they suddenly need to have like government assistance, like furlough scheme? Why would they go, oh no, we've got to lay staff off? So yes, they were lying. US soccer league ticket prices range from $20 to 200. That's actually pretty reasonable if you look at the exchange rate. So £15 to £170, something like that kind of range. That's not bad. That's half the value of what a Premier League ticket is in your price range. And that's not including away ticket prices that the opposition would then set on their website for their ticket allocation. That is really, really good pricing. Um, but again, you're playing at a lower level. I don't know what the MLS would be an equivalent. You would probably double that, triple that. But when that compares to prices over here, that's actually cheaper. And that's not including transportation to get to the game. If I was to go see Blackburn play at home, I've got to go on a train for 6 to 10 hours, and that includes multiple changes. Um, it would be an all day affair just to get there. So I'd have to go up the night before, find then a hotel or an Airbnb, then go to the game, public transport, most likely a taxi or a bus to the game, then the same back to hotel or be it Airbnb, or B&B or guest house or however I would have to sort out accommodation, and then public transportation to get home the following day. Because I'm not doing it on game day, that would be just ridiculous. Because I would have to actually go north to go south to go southwest to go south to go west to go southwest. That's how it works out. I'd have to do multiple train changes. It's ridiculous. So that's what a lot of. I'm going to take the snood off. Well, actually, I'm going to leave the snood on because it's actually kind of really, really cold this evening. I'm not feeling 100%, and I've got to be up early in the morning. Let's just get that. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm wearing two blankets at the moment. I've got two blankets on the go, so it is a bit chilly in the flat. I do apologise, or apartment if you're from North America. Right. So no, the ticket prices for where Dan works in the league he works for at the club at Sacramento. That's not bad pricing. I wouldn't say it's the cheapest, and I wouldn't say it's the most expensive I've ever seen. That's pretty reasonable. The upper end ticket price, I would say, is a bit on the high end, but they're still less than some that I've seen over the years. Oh, Hockey Fights UK, you're an interesting one. Now I follow your channel, and it's good to see a fellow YouTuber, obviously supporting each other. I've left comments on your channel in the past, and I wasn't aware you were a subscriber because you've obviously met the threshold to leave a comment because you've got to be subscribed for over 20 minutes. Speaking of ticket prices, my Sheffield United season ticket this season was £357 for me. That is not bad. That is not bad at all. Actually, to be fair, that is actually not bad. That's actually very, very reasonable, considering. But again, I don't know where you're seated in the stadium of Bramall Lane. If you're in one of the nosebleeds, as it's known, or close to the pitch, or at one of the cop end, um, that is actually a very and the concession price. Well, there you go. I would argue that the nosebleeds are probably a lot cheaper. So you've gone for pitch side. They're the desirable ones you want. The first 10 rows in a stadium are the ones you want to get. They're the desirable ones. Um, the cop end where the firms sit, or the ultras, if you go to Europe, the loudest fans, so right behind the home goal, as it's known, they're the ones that, if you, I'd say, middle of that, you're looking at possibly double the price. But that's actually not bad prices, to be fair. I think Sheffield United are actually quite a reasonably priced club, from all accounts. I've never heard of fans of Sheffield United protesting about how the club's run, the prices of tickets. I'm not saying they don't. I'm not saying that there's not fans of Sheffield United who haven't joined fan protests saying enough's enough, we charge too much. I've never heard of Sheffield United fans having a go at the club as owners. Now, I could be wrong on that. It was also paid for this season an early bird price before we lost in the playoffs to Forest. That could have been Premier League prices, but we messed up. No, but again, you've been given that first refusal, as it's known in regards to, you are an existing customer. We can give you first refusal. Here's an early offer deal as a member. That's still a reasonable price. I don't know what the rest of the championship. I don't know what Blackburn's season ticket prices currently are. I know when we were a Premier League club before the Venkies took over, for a Premier League season ticket, we were the cheapest, and that was roughly what fans were paying as a Premier League club as the cheapest. Arsenal are one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive season ticket price packages. Um, Now, whether they obviously they moved from hybrid to the Emirates, and there's, even though they paid the stadium rebuild off, they've still got to justify filling a bigger stadium. They want to maximise the revenue, um, and they don't have as much money behind them as, let's say, a Chelsea or a Man City, for example. If I want to go to Sacramento Kings game, it's a minimum of $40 to $50 for the crap seats. Okay, that's fine. It's really nice having a stadium 5 miles away. It makes me really appreciate stadiums in the heart of cities. Um, yeah, the Americans in North America, things are done. Um, they've done differently uh, uh, to at least the UK. I'm not sure about Europe, because traditionally stadiums, doesn't matter what the sport is. We'll say football or soccer in this instance. Generally, stadiums are used to be in a neighbourhood of a city. So if you look at Liverpool, you've got Anfield and Goodison, are separated by Stanley Park. They're both in the same area of Liverpool, which is actually the Everton area, which used to be a separate village before Liverpool swallowed it up. The old terraces and such used to be technically part of Lancashire. Um, they're in a inner city suburb. Both stadiums are very rough area of the city as well, high crime rate, but they're right in middle of housing developments. Um, but more modern stadium builds, you'll notice they put on the edge of towns and cities. So the Medeski, or the Select Carly Stadium, as I should call it now, when I do my Reading history video, the old Elm Park used to be surrounded by terraces, as in the old rows of houses. Medeski, Select Carling Stadium, was built on the site of the old, I think was it the old biscuit factory? It was definitely an industrial site there that was knocked down and replaced with a science park and a new stadium. And there used to be a brewery next door. So the biscuit factory was one side, and the brewery was the other side, and that was on old industrial land. They built a football stadium. It's a nice stadium, but it is getting on now. But with the Americans, zoning laws are different in the US. So in Europe, you'll have lots of mixed zoning. So you will have residential areas, and then there'll be some commercial districts surrounded by residential, and there'll be mixed residential commercial. So not exactly where I live, because there's not a lot of businesses in the area I live. But if you go up the road to the main heart of the town centre, you'll have flats above shops. You would not necessarily get that as much in a US city. You'll have commercial um, developments section, whole city block, and then the next city block you might have the apartment building. Um, So zoning laws in the US, they do vary from state to state and city to city or jurisdiction, but they are very, very different to the UK and the rest of Europe. And the same goes for Australia and New Zealand. Zoning laws are more mixed zoning of cities and towns, whereas in the US, there's much the way they zone cities out is very, very different. So you're more likely to have a sports arena in the dead centre of a city, whereas in Europe, when they decide to knock down the old stadium and they build a new one, it's normally on the edge of the city, probably near the city airport, or a brand new train station built for that facility. And they try and keep it away from residential areas should there be any disorder or security issues. Because not every local wants to have a football or rugby stadium literally outside their front door. When it comes to match day, that's a lot of people coming into an area, and that can be quite disruptive. Um, but it's interesting. The new Everton Stadium, it will be modern, but there's a lot of baggage that comes with it. There's been a corruption scandal with the city council in Liverpool. There's been arrests made. There's been bribery allegations. There's a fraud investigation. It's cost Liverpool UNESCO World Heritage status. The old docks were actually quite historical, um, and it's costing Everton a lot of money, which means they're in breach of financial fair play. Um, I went to Elm Park in the 1980s for a Walsall match. I was so drunk that night, I barely remember it. Kerry Dixon played for Reading. You might be old enough. You'll be old enough to remember Robin Friday. Andy, Robin Friday. Let that sink in. That's a name you probably haven't heard for a while. Well, no, the new stadium at Everton. It does look. The renderings, what the plans look like, it's going to end up looking like. They look fantastic. At the same time, it has caused. I mean, Everton. Bill Kenwright, when he was really pumping the money in originally, he's been trying to build a new stadium or get planning permission since the mid '90s. This has been discussed. They initially came up with the. I think they were, approaching the idea to city council, floating the idea around about the turn of the millennium, turn of the century. So about 25 years they've been discussing, late '90s, 2000s. They've been discussing building a new stadium rather than doing what Liverpool done with Anfield, which is build in place, refurb in place, extend in place. Goodison, similar size to Anfield traditionally, if not once was the bigger stadium. Instead of like refurbing a stand and building a new stand, they've decided to not really upgrade Goodison. Oh, we're going to go with a stadium. Now they can't build a stadium on Stanley Park because just not that's an iconic piece of land. They could have done, but they're not. And so therefore, it does create a bit of an issue about where they're going to plonk the new stadium. They've decided to go with with docks, and there's nothing wrong with redeveloping it in a city neighbourhood or an area that's gone out of use or needs rejuvenation and investment. Nothing wrong with that. However, the way the club has gone about it and the current ownership has gone about it, with Bill Kenwright as chairman signing the checks, has caused issues within the city of Liverpool, with the city council, the mayor's office, local politicians. There has been knock-on impacts of the decision to build a new stadium. Now, yes, if they do get relegated, that could mean worse than a Leeds United situation, um, and worse than a Derby County situation. We could be into buried territory or Rangers, and so I think this is where I think yes, I personally think they should have upgraded Goodison, much like what Liverpool did at Anfield, what Man United have done at Old Trafford in the past, what Stamford Bridge sort of has become, but is limited with size of ground and buildings nearby. But what they have done at Chelsea, they could have done what Tottenham did with White Hart Lane and rotate the stadium a little bit and rebuild, whilst having to ground share. They could, AFC Wimbledon's a little bit of a different one, where MK Dons and Wimbledon FC and all that, but they had to ground share while the issues with Plough Lane were resolved. There are various options. But with what they've done here, yeah, it's a bit of a shambles. It's more not that they decided, okay, we've got to have a new stadium. It's how they've gone about getting there and the process behind it. And yes, it's an iconic venue, and yes, it's a lot of people forget how iconic the venue actually is historically. If we actually go back into the history and look at the history of the stadium, the iconic moments there. Yes, the '66 World Cup. Yes, the great Everton teams of Dixie Dean in the past, and even up that '95 FA Cup underdog winning team under Joe Royle. Some iconic moments that that stadium and that club has seen. Some great European nights. Um, where, but at the moment, it's a club in crisis. This is a club that's lost its identity, and so yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. It's fine. I didn't realise till the Arsenal match Oxford made me stadium. I don't know what's. I don't really know what to make of the Kassam and the fact they haven't been there that long. Oxford United's another one of those clubs that has had financial. Yes, they're a lower league club and all that, and we can debate the fact that the European ban in the '80s had a negative impact on Oxford, which I think it did. Um, had that European ban not been in place, they could have actually been a founder member of the Premier League, for all we know, after their League Cup win. But the Kassam is not stadium because it's only got three bloody stands and a car park. So the way the stadium's laid out, it's not been there that long. That's what's um, interesting. But it's a May move. They may decide to move on from it. That then raises some questions about, okay, where they're going to put a new stadium should they want one. And Oxford being a city that it is well, it's going to be fun to get some planning permission for that. Oxford is a very interesting city when it comes to planning and and try and that's an interesting one. But I don't know enough about the ownership of Oxford United, the current ownership that is, and their financials to pass comment. Um, I think they're a decently run club for their size. I don't hear many grumblings about the ownership currently, although they have had their money problems in the past. The old Manor Ground over Kassam all day, the old grounds with character. Look, Sheffield United are going nowhere, and you can see the upgrades that Sheffield United have made to Bramall Lane over the years. Same with Sheffield Wednesday with Hillsborough. You can see some of the old grounds like Ewood Park, Blackburn, Turf Moor with Burnley, Sellers Park, Palace, even Charlton Athletic with the Valley. You can see where clubs are very reluctant to move on, and they've decided to modernise in place. And then you can definitely see where things have gone wrong. And yes, you could argue sometimes building a brand new stadium has bankrupted the team, but then you could also argue not upgrading and maintaining a stadium has caused problems for a team like Wimbledon, who ended up becoming MK Dons, and then AFC Wimbledon comes along, and so therefore there's an issue. Having issues with the stadium, having stadium problems becomes a problem. Um, and uh, we'll see what happens with like clubs like Oxford United. Um, but it's what it is. The old Manor Ground was great when full, small time ground with fans close to pitch. Basically, Loftus Road then, QPR. Loftus Road, I think the most intimidating atmosphere at a stadium I have ever come across in my life. Ever. I mean, I haven't been there for a long time, but when Craven Cottage was having a massive refurb, um, Fulham had to ground share with QPR. and so I saw many a Fulham FA Cup and League game at Loftus Road. And I'm not sure how happy QPR were at the time to ground share. And I'm not sure what other option Fulham had, because Chelsea obviously would have had their Champions League commitments at the time. And so there was a lack of stadium availability, which ruled out a ground share there. Plus, I'm not sure how both clubs would have felt about that. And the old Griffin Park at Brentford wasn't Premier League standard at the time. It wasn't of a decent enough standard for Fulham. So Loftus Road was the only option available at the time for Fulham to use. And I think they had to ground share for a couple of seasons. But you're right, like it's ridiculous how close you are to the pitch. It's not Prenton Park for Tranmere. You are literally sneeze and you're on the field. You cough something and fall forward, you're on the field. So there are some real tight grounds in English football. And Loftus Road is one of, I think, the most intimidating atmosphere I have ever seen. Um, as a player, you must feel that atmosphere. I don't know, and as a manager or the training stuff, you must feel like the hair on the back of your neck stand up because you know. I think it's about 18,000 people want to kill you, basically. Um, I found the atmosphere quite intimidating as a fan. Just as a neutral, I was like, this is something. It's one of my favourite grounds. I mean, I would recommend anyone to go to Loftus Road and just experience match day at Loftus Road. Bearing in mind, Loftus Road has hosted rugby league internationals. Um, Let that sink in, and sold out. So to say there's no rugby league fans in the south of England is a lie because they've sold out Loftus Road. Grimsby Town, yeah, falling to bits, but brilliant atmosphere every time there are some grounds that are just how are they still using them. There's a couple of Scottish grounds like that, like we've got the light fitting's fallen out. I always put that there. There's some grounds in Europe that you lean on a bit of wall and it crumbles. You know that's a problem. That's a health and safety hazard. Oh wait, we're in X country in Europe, and oh, it's health and safety. What the is that? Um, but yeah, there are some stadiums that could use and should have some urgent investment and refurb, but the clubs just can't afford it. And Grimsby is one of those clubs that just cannot afford to pump money into a stadium refurb. It's just something that they do not have the spare cash lying around going, oh yeah, we because they're a lower league club and there's not enough money in the football league right now to. And this is part of the problem that we have is the obsession with the Premier League. Um, is causing problems for lower league clubs. And to a certain extent, the Championship, with if you've got the right ownership, but the money isn't evenly distributed. I think the TV deal was broken, but that's nothing. Um, yeah, I think that adds to the atmosphere a little bit. I mean, I haven't been to Blundell Park. I would love to go. Honestly, I would. Um, but there are some lower league grounds that leave you wondering, like, how is this allowed? Like, how is this safe? you know, will I die just um, going through the turnstile with like the gate fall on my head. But they don't have the spare cash, and that is a problem. And I think that's the problem with the TV deal, how it's been negotiated by the Premier League and the Football League. Because they every year there's the TV deal negotiations or the TV package negotiations every few years where they go, like, this is what it's worth for the next X amount of seasons. And the way the deal is structured is not great. Not great. Oh, the old Valley. Yeah, I've done a video on Charlton Athletic, and again, they had stadium issues where they were exiles basically in London. There was a period I think they were ground sharing with Palace as well. So Crystal Palace is basically being used as a youth hostel or a dog pound basically for homeless London clubs. Like Crystal Palace, they must have like, oh yeah, we've got a stadium to rent. Palace, I think Simon Jordan, when he was chairman, was like, "Oh, okay, I'm making some money off rival clubs here because they've got to pay us a rental fee." But at the same time, Christ, our pitch has got to be relayed every 6 months because we've got one or two extra teams using it. But Crystal Palace has basically been a boarding house for those homeless London clubs. And both Charlton uh, and Wimbledon, or the old Wimbledon before they became MK Dons, have had to ground share at Selhurst Park with Crystal Palace. And I'm not sure how enamoured the Palace fans really were with that and the club, because they would have to agree some kind of rental fee. Um, with an already struggling club financially, to go, you've got to pay us X amount of your matchday revenues. And you've got to think Charlton and Wimbledon at the time were losing money, struggling for money. And then you've got Palace who are like, well, we can't really overcharge you because you're basically bankrupt, but we can't let you use our stadium for nothing. And that became a problem. And then you've got the policing issues with the rivalry between the sets of fans. And it's just a nightmare that the Metropolitan Police would rather not have. And I've got to do a video on AFC Wimbledon and MK Dons. And I will link into the old Wimbledon crazy gang history of Wimbledon Football Club. And the hatred that almost every other club has for MK Dons, and the soft spot everyone has for AFC Wimbledon, really. And that's something that I need to do. And we can argue the fact that yes, AFC Wimbledon are allowed to have the history of the old Wimbledon with the FA Cup of '88 and all that BS. They haven't actually won the FA Cup. That was the old Wimbledon. But the hatred for MK Dons is just going to be brilliant. Yeah, but Simon Jordan, I'm actually finding. Well, he was the chairman. He's the one who's got to have all the agreements and all that, and figure out how that agreement with Ron Nodes and all that all works out. Now, Simon Jordan, I'm finding myself agreeing with Simon Jordan more and more as time goes on, and I find that scary because a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, before the European Super League and all that BS, I couldn't stand Simon Jordan. I really couldn't. But as I follow Talksport on the YouTube side of things, I don't listen on the radio anymore because you know half our lorries at work don't the radios don't work. Whereas at one of my previous depots, me and my driver would whack on Talksport for the Alan Brazil, Ali McCoist's breakfast show for the first 3 hours of our shift, and only one truck had a working radio that picked up Talksport, and it was fantastic. Listen to Ali McCoist and Alan Brazil for 3 hours from 6 till 9. It was fantastic. The breakfast show. And this is before Alan Brazil wound it down to 2 days a week, but it was absolutely fantastic. And then they would have Ray Parler on there, and it was just a fantastic just listening to that on the radio in the morning. And then Simon Jordan would come on at lunchtime, the lunchtime early afternoon slot, and that's when we're winding down our shifts. We might hear an hour of it. And quite honestly, I wasn't a fan of Simon Jordan 2.5, 3 years ago. But there are certain topics that I am starting to agree with Simon Jordan, but I never thought I would say that. Never thought I would say that, and it's disturbing me. But as I've got a little bit older and I've had to obviously become a bit less biased in my thinking, and with the channel, I have become a little bit less biased. I have to be a little bit more open and I wouldn't say transparent, but a bit more, uh, I wouldn't say passive, but practical in viewing things and thinking about things. So not taking things at pure face value, but actually properly digging. And when you actually do your proper research, all the history videos I've done on rugby league and football, soccer, if you're from North America or Australia, are really, really interesting because then you peel back what you see in the mainstream media and what you see on the Athletic. If you read the Athletic, or you read the Gazette dello Sport, or you read the whatever sports publication or sports website, or follow another YouTuber or someone else on social media. Actually, going and look at the historical facts. So things like Wikipedia, although they're not 100% accurate, 97% of what they say there is the truth, which is a lot more than what the mainstream media, which is 70% BS. Only 30% of what you actually read in the mainstream media is the actual facts. The rest is opinion pieces and spurious what ifs and innuendos. I actually did media studies as an A level, so um, I was actually told my first day 70% of what you've got to learn is bullshit. You have to try and sell that bullshit to as many people as possible, and only 30% is the truth. There will be a proportion of that that is your personal opinion, which is your personal opinion, how you feel about a situation, your personal gut feeling, and the rest of it is just crap. And that's true. But yes, agreeing with Simon Jordan, take a break, get some fresh air. No, at least he's not scared. True, he's not scared to think what that is true. Yes, he is. He has got some strong opinions. I don't agree with everything he says. I don't agree with everything he says. I would say that I disagree with that. But if I was to be in the same room with Simon Jordan, I wouldn't be like, "You're an effing idiot. You're wrong." I would like, I have a different view on that. I would actually happily sit there and discuss both points of view, um, because he will know a lot more about running a football club or the sports industry than me, the thinking outside the box fan, just seeing this from you know the outside. He's been on the inside, and yes, Palace under Simon Jordan were less successful than they are now. They're not doing as well. They didn't do as well under Simon Jordan as they're doing under the current, you know, direction, the current ownership. And that'd be something I'd say. Well, the club that you were once chairman of is doing better now than under your tenure. Can you explain why? That is a fact, and he gets a bit defensive about that, and he's allowed to because he put a lot of money into the football club out of his own pocket. Didn't have to do that. And it wasn't a successful. It was a yo-yo period for the club. The club went up and down, and that's got to be frustrating if you want to stabilise as the fan base and have success and push on. The sports muffin went on to an epic journey to reach. Yes, we did. There were some ups and downs, and we'll see what happens. So, loving the new rugby league videos. France, USA, and Canada. South Seas Islanders next. I think I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at South Africa. Because they have appeared at a World Cup. They're more of a rugby union and cricketing nation, or they are a sports mad nation, but they have been at a Rugby League World Cup in 2000, and they've disappeared off the face of the earth when it comes to rugby league. And that'll be an interesting one because South Africa is a sports mad country. Um, it wasn't always illegal in South Africa. So there you go. And it was the same in Greece until recently that it was actually banned. Why that is the case is beyond me. So you have to then. This is where I want to research and dig in and have a look at why the government as well. You can't play that. True, they weren't very good. We can all agree on that, and that is the problem with rugby league being taken seriously as an international sport outside of England, France, Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, and the Pacific Islands at international level. Why only three? Is it two or three nations have won the World Cup? I think, or four nations. Um, and hosting a World Cup, only four nations have hosted the World Cup, and why when we come to the latter stages of the tournament, it's always the same nations that make the final four. It's it you know it, so yes, South Africa appeared at two Rugby League World Cups and were battered, and they were absolutely hammered. So I find it interesting that the South African government has gone, this sport is now banned. That's what really interests me. But I want to understand the reasons why and delve into that and do that. I do my own research on that because that's what the fun bit likes. So I like actually reading up on why the South African authorities have gone, no, you can't play that. It was the same in Greece, which is ridiculous. And South Africa is a sports mad nation. You would think, actually, let's give this a go. Um, they produce too much rugby union talent. They could nick some of that and go, right, you're not making the rugby union great because we've got too much talent, but we don't want to lose you to European rugby. How about you play rugby league for your country? And we'll come up with like the wildebeest or whatever nickname they have, because they've got the Proteus for the cricket team, and they've got what's the football team called? Nickname? shit. They've got the Springboks for the rugby union. The football team's got its own like nickname as well. Um, let's call them the Gazelle, for example. And yeah, Bafana. There you go, Bafana. That's so they've got their they are a sports mad country. They've won Africa Cup of Nations with football. They've won Cricket World Cups, been number one in the Test rankings. They've won Rugby Union World Cups. So they this is not a country that doesn't love sport. And when the apartheid era was a thing, obviously being banned from competition, we missed out on a golden generation of South African talent, and that's why these rebel tours were a thing. So there you go. Yeah, there are infrastructure problems, and that's to do with corruption rather than anything else, and people siphoning it off. Um, but that's an issue in a lot of countries. Energy supply at the moment is not just a developing world kind of thing. Um, but yeah, look, and again, why the government's banned it? But I think government corruption is one of the big ones as well. But as a sports nation, it's ingrained in their education system, in high school or public school, and in their communities as well. It's a thing. Um, and I've got South African neighbours, so I can always go, "Oh yeah, um, what was your chosen sport?" And I think my South African neighbour upstairs, he played rugby union at school to a decent level. He didn't carry it on after compulsory, you've got compulsory play it, but he did it at school to a decent level. Um, I've been watching England's netball series in Africa and the stream. It's farcical. That could be for a number of issues. That's not just a could be satellite interference. That could be a whole number of issues there. Um, yeah, but no, the South Africans, when it comes to their education system and sport, it's a lot stronger than I think. This is a Commonwealth thing. Australia, New Zealand, even here to a certain extent, Canada. There's a lot more emphasis put on sport in education than other countries. So Italy and France, for example, very successful sporting nations, less emphasis in the education system with sport. That's more of a personal choice outside of outside. I love this. Two blokes talking about netball with on the stream. That's hilarious. Yeah, netball is an interesting one. Notice the nations involved, all Commonwealth nations. The US is not involved. Jamaica are a very good side as well when it comes to netball. But notice the nations involved, Commonwealth nations. The US isn't involved there, and that is really surprising. That a sport that is played globally is not not. What would I've chosen to play professionally? I mean, I was decent at school, but I wasn't the best. I was decent at pool, but I wasn't the best. I was decent at poker, but wasn't the best. Um, my dad could have been a professional athlete, but decided on a military career. But um, he made that decision to go down the military path as a teenager at the age of 17. Um, and the rest is history. In regards to netball itself, I mean, it the TV deal they've managed to get for themselves, the sponsorship deals, the funding, the structures in place, um, fantastic. That is fantastic. Um, they get good. I'm a goalkeeper in football and play a bit of darts. That's interesting. Tracy Neville's a netball coach. Sister Neville, yes, that is correct. Tracy Neville is. I don't know if she still is the national coach, but Tracy Neville is involved with. I think now she's involved with the administration side of things, but she was a very successful netball coach for a very very long time. And the Neville family is a sporting family. They've got links with the old Bury Football Club. I think their dad used to be a cricketer, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and um, yeah, very sporting family. Netball is fast the basketball. You only have 3 seconds to pass the ball. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at it. There are certain sports where there are time limitations of being in possession, um, and you've got to distribute possession, but still not the fastest sport in the world, which is ice hockey. You can go from one end 200, is it 200? It's 200 yards or 200 feet, 200 feet rink, NHL rink. Or I think it's 200, is it 205, 210 feet for an Olympic or a double IHF sanctioned rink because there's three sizes. Um, you can go from one end to the other in a couple of seconds, and the speed you're skating at, the collision is equivalent to a car accident at 35 to 40 mile an hour if you collide with the other player. Imagine doing that 10 times a game. Let's say as a defensive defenseman against a powerful, when you guys are having a running battle and you are colliding that often. Yeah, fastest team game on earth. You really are motoring. I know it's 200 feet long in the NHL. I think it's 210 feet Olympic and double IHF. It can be between 200 to 210 feet. So there you go. And the width varies. I think it's 100 feet wide, I believe. Something like the dimensions vary a little bit with double IHF. Minimum and maximum requirements in Olympic, which is a little bit different. Um, Outside of North America, is there any sports I'm not well informed on? The Gaelic Amateur Association sports. I want to know. I want to learn more about hurling, especially, and Gaelic football to a certain extent. Um, I think. I think they're the ones I want to learn more about, and that's because I've got Irish heritage, and I've got a few friends who've lived and worked in Ireland, and they've been out and watched hurling and been to Croke Park, and I want to understand more about the history. I know there's a social and historical aspect about why um, you know the sport remains amateur. I understand the historical aspects and social aspects behind that, and that they're controversial and they're complicated, and it's not a simple um, a simple situation. But I want to understand more about the structures of the league, the structures imposed, why they remain amateur fiercely. Is that good for the Gaelic sports long term? Is it bad? There's a whole range of things to look out there, and there is a big cultural and social importance, especially in the rural areas of Ireland outside the big towns and cities. When it comes to hurling and Gaelic football, they're very very important. They're community sports, really. Um, Olympic is. I knew it was either the width or the length was different. One of them. I wouldn't say I'm the king of sports. I wouldn't say I'm the king. Um, I would say what's the term? Gifted enthusiast. I think is a good way of looking at it. Um, um, Lovable enthusiast, maybe. I'm enthusiastic. I'm a student. Wouldn't say I'm the king. No, no, no. Do you know about Ultimate Frisbee? Yeah, I love Frisbee. I've seen. The golf equivalent where they try and do it like on a golf course where they're trying to fling it onto a pole. And then I've seen the team ultimate frisbee, which is just pure violence with a disc flying around. Uh, there's two types of frisbee I've seen where they or ultimate disc or whatever it is, where they like on a golf course and they're trying to throw it and get it onto the pole. They might have a par three and the guy launches it, and the distance they get and the accuracy they have to get. It's either on a pole or into a little like cage thing that catches it, and then you've got ultimate frisbee with the team frisbee where you're passing it like lacrosse or ice hockey or field hockey, and they're beating the crap out of each other with body checks, and it's basically like AFL kind of violence with a frisbee. Um, but the ultimate frisbee, and I've seen the the golf equivalent with the frisbee golf kind of thing. It looks kind of fun. At the same time, it's just a fun game you play in your back garden or down the park with, with big open field with your friends. Um, I I I first heard about it. I'm gonna say about 10 years ago, um, and this is in the early days of YouTube. YouTube was only 4 or 5 years old at the time, and someone had seen a clip on YouTube and said, "Got to check this out." And this is back in my youthful days of daytime drinking and um, uh, was absorbing THC into my system. Yeah, this is in my student days. I think is the best way to describe that. Um, and there's a big art centre with a massive load of parkland around it near where I used to live, and I used to work there as well. And so many a summer day was spent in the park lobbing a frisbee around, and sometimes we get loads of random people. People didn't even know, and it was literally just a massive. Everyone was playing, and it turned into sort of like ultimate frisbee because we were trying to kill each other at the same time, not spill the beer or the cider or the bottle of wine or whatever we were knocking back. Probably white lightning at one point, and just having a laugh. Heineken lacrosse. No, it was a bit stronger than Heineken was being consumed and ingested and smoked. It was if you have an issue with drugs, talk to Frank Championship. But no, we had a lot of fun, and we were carefree. And it's like 15 to 10 years ago. Yeah, it was that carefree period, and now it's obviously different, and the circumstances are different, and you know. Um, Go forward 15, 16 years, and you look back and go, "Oh my god, I did that when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. Like, what was I doing?" And yes, there were some injuries sustained. I know one of my mates broke his ankle playing five-side. We decided to just have a kick about. We got football and started playing. And one of my mates came out with an American football, and we were like launching it, and then I was doing the punts, showing them how to spiral bomb the American football, and how hard it is to spiral bomb one of them. Um, Yes, I've seen the YouTube footage of Dana White's Ultimate Hand, slapping competition. It's just basically saying, "Here, give yourself brain damage," because a lot of them are using a closed fist like that, which can actually kill you. There's a Russian championship that's very, very similar, and it's just an excuse to basically knock someone out and win money for doing it. It's stupid, but Americans and Russians will buy into it because it's just people being brain dead, giving each other brain damage. Um, when the sports buff and grew up around Reading, I basically lived in this area for 29 years, um, east of Reading. Um, I went to school in this area. I moved back to the UK officially in 1992. So when 28, 29 years, yeah, 29 years, nearly 30 years, no, 31 years. Hold on, God, it's been 31 years since I've been back full time in the UK. I was born overseas in a military base, uh, and yeah, 31 years since I've been back. That is a long time. The amateur ranks equal honesty and integrity, no betting scandals, etc. Professionals equal money, which can taint otherwise honest players. It's an old fight, never resolved. The Gaelic Amateur Association is a bit more different. There's a bit more politics and social reasoning behind it, and rebellious reasons as well. To basically give two fingers to the government in London at the time when Ireland was part of Great Britain. Um, no, it was actually my birth certificate, which I do have on me. Not directly on me, but I do actually have it in my filing system. It actually says British personnel overseas, BPO, because my dad was in the British Army. We're based in Germany. It also has the location, which is Münster, which is near Osnabrück, and the Dutch, which Osnabrück is where they filmed Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the castle scenes. That's Osnabrück Castle, and I was about what 40 miles from the Dutch border, something like that. Van der Sportwaffen. Ja, es ist gut. Johann van der Boffen. Büfern. Uh, I'm a Prussian officer. Um, yeah, so on the prevailing wind, you can smell the cannabis from Amsterdam and the tulips. Yeah, yeah. So I was born in Münster, and I lived in Osnabrück and Hamer, and I actually have a photograph somewhere of my house in Hamer, and the street name is going to make you laugh. I lived at 52B Berliner Strasse, Berlin Street. Yeah, Berliner Strasse, um, um, which is yeah, I think. Or no, I know it was Zeppelinstrasse or Berliner Strasse. It was one of those two, and it was the main road was I think Zeppelinstrasse or Berliner Strasse, something like that, and it was 52B. Um, what was it like living there? I have very few memories because I was only a 2 or 3 when I moved back. I don't really remember a lot. I think I remember my last 2 months in Germany, or so. Um, it's one of them where I remember I remember the last couple of months, and that's about it. Because I was still a toddler. Like when you're a kid, your head's just like a sponge. Your brain just you're absorbing everything. Like you're learning how to walk, you're learning how to talk, you're learning how to read. You're getting used to your surroundings. I don't remember much. I remember the army naffy, which is basically a Spar supermarket. I remember that. I remember going to the um, the doctor's surgery. I remember being very ill because I had whooping cough, which wasn't pleasant. Um, I remember going to Zeebrugge, I think, was the port. We used to go to Felixstowe to get the ferry, so we'd have to drive from Essex around the south side of the M25 onto the M3 to the Bagshot Lightwater Junction 3 turn off, and then up the A322 to Bracknell to get home. Um, and yeah, it was one of them. It was just not remembering a lot, but I've been through the area of Germany I used to live in since, and it's weird. It's one of them because I have limited little memories, but that was like 32, 33 years ago. Like I'm 34 this year. And Munster is a very. I mean, I've done a video of the history of Munster on the other channel. It's one of the first videos I actually did on the other channel, 4.5 years ago. But yes, Munster, the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648, I think. Yeah, 1648, the Treaty of Munster, the 80 Years' War, all that kind of stuff. Munster and Osnabrück were very, very important in the Holy Roman Empire, yes. And they're very, very beautiful, beautiful. Oh, Rhineland, Nord Rhineland Westphalia is the German region. So the big football clubs in that part of Germany for supporter base. Ironically, Borussia Dortmund is the biggest club for fan base in the area, but actually, I was born closer to Werder Bremen and their home ground. Bremerhaven and Bremen were closer than Dortmund to where we were living in off-base housing, and so very interesting that the area. Obviously, yes, there is the Press Münster Football Club, which is sponsored, which is basically owned by a beer company. Um, and so you've got Bremerhaven and Bremen, which is just southwest of Hamburg, and you've got Kiel, which is the German naval, uh, which we basically flattened that in the war with our bombers. Um, and the Luftwaffe of Germany couldn't shoot us down. They did. They did give it a back. And of course you've got Dortmund and got oh, shit, what's the other bloody club? I think Cologne and some other big clubs, Stuttgart and all that to the south. Insel Holstein Kiel, Hamburger SV, Werder Bremen. Um, I'm really butchering some of these things with my German, but it was very interesting. If you look at the fan base, yes, you obviously got the local club, but the young kids, they will, Werder Bremen and Borussia Dortmund. A lot of the British and Canadian Army personnel would obviously go to games, their league, and a lot more went to Dortmund than to Bremen for some weird reason. So there's that. Kaiserslautern is another one, um, and Schalke, Gelsenkirchen, Schalke is another one. So the that area of Germany has a lot of football clubs, and I've really got to do the history videos on Werder Bremen and Borussia Dortmund and Schalke, and I've done Kaiserslautern. Cologne's another one. By Leverkusen. Leverkusen's the one I've done a video on. Neverkusen was the nickname. I got Hamburg. There's a fair few fair few German clubs that I could definitely do histories on and have fun doing it. RB Leipzig. I mean, what's the point of that? Because until the Red Bull ownership, they were like the fourth division club. Wasn't it ridiculous? Um, Almenia Aachen. God, we are talking about some really obscure clubs now. I mean, the interesting thing about the the German league is until this period of dominance by Bayern, it's actually a very, very competitive league system. It's just the last 10, 15 years that it's become very uncompetitive. Um, and I think it's finally caught up with the German national side. I could have been an army chaplain where it's gone. Nah, I did actually apply for the army. I'm not going to go into the reasons why I'm not in the army. A few of my good friends are in the army. My cousin's in the RAF. My mate's brother's in the Navy. I've got a lot of friends and family involved in the services. For what it's worth, one club you could be is Arles Avignon, the epic rise to the epic fall. Um, interesting one. Interesting one. Do I think German unification has damaged football in Eastern Germany? It already sucked in Eastern Germany before the unification. Just saying, it wasn't great in the East anyway. Um, but I wouldn't say it's damaged it. No, I think there are much bigger social issues why the eastern bit of Germany is still struggling economically. And there's other issues to do with that. I could discuss German unification on the other channel, really, because that's at the time I'm born in '89. The Berlin Wall, they just knocked holes in it 3.5 weeks before I was born, literally. David Hasselhoff sat on top of the Berlin Wall singing his song, and they're knocking it down with sledgehammers and drills. And it officially came down in its entirety, within a year and a half. But they were tearing down the Iron Curtain in the days and weeks. The day I was born, Ceausescu was overthrown in Romania. The following day, he was shot. There you go. FC Magdeburg. There you go. There's a decent East German side back in the day. They're not now, but they were one. I wouldn't say unification has caused the decline or the struggle of the Eastern German clubs. I would say there's the economics behind the reunification and redistribution of wealth and job opportunities and investment. And when you've got lower incomes, fan bases, and if you've got the 50+1 rule, which is the favoured form of club ownership, and you've got less disposable income, your club's going to have less financial clout to buy and sign and retain players and pay staff and make money. And therefore, you're going to have less competitive teams unless you really are very, very good at scouting, and then you can really entice your players to have that hometown discount, and then maybe sell one or two players for big money. You're not going to make any money at all. And so, there you go. It's facts. It is facts. Look at the situation we're finding in the Premier League now with clubs, or in English football, in every division, including the Premier League, from the National League upwards to the top 5 tiers. It's kind of obvious that the clubs that are doing well financially and are doing well in the league and where they are geographically in a country, and those clubs that are struggling a little bit, or either with where they are in the league or with disposable income to sign players and their fan base. And again, so the Scunthorpes and Oldhams are where they are. Yes, bad ownership, but also they're in very poor areas in the UK. Whereas your Newcastles, yes, you've got all this money, but where they are in relation to the rest of the North East, Newcastle is wealthier than Sunderland down the road. They're better disposable income, more jobs, more investment, a slightly higher standard of living, and that has an impact as well. Do I think the BBC should show more minor British sports? They're making a mess of the sports they're showing now, and their quality of presenting has gone downhill. And then you could argue, well, less people are paying the license fee. There's the add-ons of changes with the broadcaster that have been a long time in the making. Direction the broadcaster is taking, whether we agree or disagree with it or not, is irrelevant. You also have to remember there are other free-to-air broadcasters in the UK. The NBA is an interesting one because Sky also has rights to the NBA and BT Sport. At various the subscription services have also at times had broadcast rights. So that is a sign that, okay, yes, fine. The broadcasters in this country, regardless of free-to-air or satellite subscription, have realised that obviously there's a market here, there's a fan base here, and they've obviously done their market research before paying for these rights, because they have to agree this with the NBA. The NBA has to sell these rights packages overseas, and they've obviously worked out there's enough appetite from the fan base here in order to buy those rights. Otherwise, it's not worth their while paying that money. So the NBA gets some money, which they will then distribute to the owners and teams and the players via, salary cap increases and so forth and so forth. And we, the fans, get to watch the product. Now, I'm not an NBA fan. I've always said that. Nothing against basketball, it's just not a sport I enjoy. Hence why there's not a lot of NBA content on the channel. That's neither here nor there. Same with Major League Baseball. Same with the NHL. Same with the NFL. Whatever. The MLS. I've seen MLS games. The major leagues, and I'll class them as the Big Five now, not the Big Four, because the MLS is starting to make some serious money as a major league. there are TV rights deals of those leagues here in the UK. It's fact. Now, when the broadcasters and the leagues over there decide to either share the rights, so with the NHL, for example, and the NBA, it will be secondhand. You know, it'll be like NBC's feed or ESPN's feed that they're using, so their commentators are with the ones spewing them, whatever. The NFL, you've got the London series or the international series, as is now known, because they're taking games to Germany as well. They're on TV. Major League Baseball. I don't know what the broadcast is going to be this summer for Major League Baseball when they're in London, but the BBC was one of them last time, alongside BT Sport. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out on a longer term basis. Um, so there's definitely the interest here. Now, what I have seen when I have watched, I mean, the last couple of years I've decided not to watch the Super Bowl anymore. Um, and there you go, the game they're showing is not actually even in North America, it's in Paris. It's the international series. And I think they're trying to win back London and the fan base in London to go, hey, look, we still have, look at the viewership figures. We want, the NBA to come back here. Now, the NBA has made an economic decision not to play the games at the O2 anymore, at the Millennium Dome. This is what it used to be. A lot of people go, what, Millennium Dome? Yeah, that's the O2. The NBA has made a conscious economic decision to go to continental Europe. Whether the city of Paris is giving them more money, they get more money out of it, whatever the economics and whatever the reason, they've signed an agreement with the city of Paris and the mayor's office and the Ministry of Sport. And there are things going on that we're not aware of on the contractual side. And they've decided to go, well, it's not, for whatever reason, we could make more money or have better arrangements for travel and the hotel space and logistics in Paris than London. I don't know why. That's my thinking behind it. But what is interesting is when there was discussions about will Jacksonville move to London, will London become an NFL city? When Sahid Khan tried to buy Wembley at that period, like 2018, 2017. So early on in the channel's history, I seem to remember, I think it was the Boston Celtics chief operations officer, COO, not the CEO, chief COO. They were playing their game in London, or one of their games in London. And the NFL, I think, at the same time were doing the London series. It was roughly at the same time that both the NBA and NFL were in London at the same time. And the interviewer sticks a microphone. I can't remember if it was Sky Sports News or BBC Sport News or BBC Sport or the mainstream news channels. And they were like, what's the likelihood of a major league franchise? So they're assuming all the major leagues, that includes the NHL, Major League Baseball, the whole lot, coming over and setting up in London or another European city. And the Boston Celtics chief operations officer, this is their chief finance officer, is either their CFO or COO, one of their high-ranking money people, basically said, not a chance, 0%. In reality, nothing. So yes, the NFL has had this long-term plan of having a team in London or having a team in Europe. And a rival league for value, the NBA makes nearly as much money as the NFL in comparison to Major League Baseball and the NHL. A similarly wealthy league, basically one of the most profitable teams, the Boston Celtics, one of the most successful and profitable teams in NBA history, in the sport. When you are asking one of the most, this team makes money, it's a license to print money, they sell out every week. They've won, I think they're the most, if not one of the most successful NBA franchises of all time. They make the league a lot of money. They've got some of the best paid basketball players ever. When their chief operations officer or chief financial, I can't remember which one it was, and he's basically saying a major franchise over here, no, never going to happen, not going to happen. Makes you wonder why then they are taking these regular season games and exhibition matches on a regular basis, COVID notwithstanding, to Europe. If it's not a viable long-term plan. Now, with things like basketball and ice hockey, no, it's not a viable plan having half a league season before playoffs where you've got to fly home and away, and that time differential, and the fact there's the Atlantic Ocean, and then currency changes, and all sorts. But the NFL had this long-term plan that within a decade, from starting their first ever London Series game, 2007, that within a decade they would have a team. They're meant to have had a team by now. It was 6 years ago that they were meant to have a team in place. So within 10 years, we will have a team in London. That was the plan. 6 years later, it still hasn't. It's been 15 years since that path, 15, 14, 15 years since that pathway was laid out. And there's still no professional NFL team here. And I don't think you were more likely to have a Super Bowl played in London than than a team here permanently. Um, so there is that, and a lot of things have changed in the intervening time span. We've had the Brexit referendum, so there's politics, there's been the economic ups and downs, the COVID pandemic, the change in the value of the currency, change in government, change in direction of the country. Then you've got the visa, getting visas or work visas. There's been some political incidents. A lot has changed since 2007 to now, and yeah, I'm not. It is, they always make money, these NFL London games. And there's 4 or 5 stadiums in London that could be used as a home venue. Obviously, the new rebuilt White Hart Lane, the Tottenham Stadium, is NFL friendly because it's got that interchangeable pitch and it's got that design in mind. You have the Emirates down the road. You have London City Stadium, which West Ham play out. That has the right configuration because you can move the seating. There's 3 stadiums. You've got Wembley and you've got Twickenham. So there's 5 stadiums in London that you could put a team in. There's a couple of stadiums up north as well. You could, you know, there's the Etihad, Old Trafford. Obviously, Old Trafford I wouldn't say would work because of the drop off of the pitch at the goal ends. You actually raised up a little bit and just drop off. But St James's Park has hosted the Magic Weekend in the Super League, the Rugby League, and Rugby Union. We've got the Amex in Brighton. Actually, is quite a nice stadium and could be used, and there is that American money there. And yes, I'm fully aware that the experience, and I watch the Pat McAfee show every now and then. I do, and he's a very interesting character, very very interesting. Is Pat McAfee, and yes, he does say that the London Games fans love it, players hate it. Players now, when they're like doing their ex-players, when they're doing the commentary or they're working as an ambassador for a team, or they're brought in for punditry and things like that as part of a broadcast team, they say they love it now as a fan, as a tourist. They hated it as players, and that's just for a one-off game. That's not for half a season, not including playoffs, like divisional playoffs and conference playoffs and all that. So I am fully aware that the players aren't overly happy with the travel, and then the turnaround, the fact it's different to a normal playing week with training and planning and working around that. And then you've got to, if you want to go out on a night out, you've got to change currency. If you want to spend notes and coins, and you've got that whole different kind of vibe where as a player you might not know the city. This might be your only experience of ever coming to the UK and London. You've got the jet lag to contend with, and obviously it's a completely, you've got the tourist traps basically. And it is what it is. The Australian Rugby League team didn't like the drop of the Old Trafford at the Rugby League World Cup. This is true. What is interesting is the last time the World Cup was played here in 2013. I think Old Trafford hosted the final then as well. I think similar things were said, and I think there's only one player involved. I know there's a couple of players who were involved in this year's World Cup who were at 2013 World Cup. I think James Tedesco is one of the players who was at the 2013 World Cup. Admittedly, he was playing for Italy. He's a dual national in that sense at the time, because of heritage and all that, and they allow you to play for your country if it's not classed as a grade A or a tier one country. Therefore, he's allowed to play Origin and all that at the moment because Italy is classed as a developing nation. So very few players involved with the World Cup had played at Old Trafford before, um, which is interesting. But yeah, they weren't happy with and a lot, and this is true with the Super League players as well, who played there. When it comes to the Super League Grand Final, um, and home England internationals. I mean, same with football or soccer for Dan in that regard. Old Trafford, yeah, that drop off, and you'll notice it's very visible. It's not just like a little. It's like it is a slope. So right at the dead ball line, if you're going for a sliding tackle or a block, um, and you or if you're the attacking player trying to block the defender from clearing, you're going to go not only into the advertising, but you're going down a slope. It literally drops a good 5 feet, 4 or 5 feet. You disappear. Players have been injured with that slope. Um, it's definitely something that regularly gets brought up by visiting teams to Old Trafford. Um, it's definitely a talking point. It's but that's one of the things that tests you at Old Trafford as a visiting team who's not used to it. But then a lot of the Super League players, not every Super League player, um, will get to play at Old Trafford in their career, in the Super League Grand Final. And not every Test player for England, for example, if they were to make the World Cup, um, will get to play on the Old Trafford surface regularly. I think out of that England setup, only a handful of players would have ever have played at Old Trafford before. Um, and like Ryan Hall, for example, would have been one. Whereas Herbie Farnsworth, who was in the Man United setup as a youngster, may have obviously been to Old Trafford a lot, being former part of their academy. Um, Doubtful he would have played there regularly, and hasn't been in the UK as a professional player ever in his career. He's been out in Australia since he was a teenager. But as I say, it's one of those playing surfaces that does get criticised quite regularly and has done over the years and will continue to be so unless they make pitch configuration changes. That's fact. Unless they drop the level of the pitch or they adjust the stadium to suit, it's going to be a thing. Londoners like to watch their favourite football team in the winter. Then in the summer there is Wimbledon, Test cricket, etc. True, that is true. I wouldn't say every single Londoner's a football fan. That's far from the case. Um, Other sports are supported in London. That is true. Um, but for a majority of sport fandom is football. Yes. The NFL does bring in fans from outside London. I have had a few of my friends have gone to NFL games in London, and they live outside London. They commute in, which is at great cost. Um, Is the drop off run? I don't know why they raise it up. Is it for drainage? I think it could be for the drainage of the pitch. There's could be drainage around it, but um, several grounds have a drop off. I think Old Trafford is one of the more steep drop off gradients, but Reading is just down the road, and Reading Football Club's just down the road. So it's an interesting one when it comes to fan support. I would say Surrey as a county probably has more Chelsea fans than Berkshire, but Reading is literally a stone's throw away. Um, and of course, you've got the other London-based clubs like Fulham and Brentford and QPR, and they're in the same kind of battleground for fans, that same kind of catchment area. That's what I call the M4 corridor. Um, M3 and M4 corridors, and then you've got Palace and you've got Wimbledon, and they will have fans outside of London, obviously, and on the west side of London. So it's called a catchment area, and Chelsea seems to be quite popular, but there's a lot of Arsenal and Tottenham fans in this area as well. And a lot of these people used to live in London who migrated, or their parents used to live in London. They've migrated out for a variety of reasons: overcrowding, property price, work, that kind of thing. But most of the London clubs will have fans in catchment. Like West Ham, a lot of people in Essex support West Ham. Charlton, a lot of people in Kent support Charlton. So catchment area. Um, there's a sizable rugby fraternity in parts of London, more in the not in the inner city, but more in the outlying suburbs and areas on the edge of London. Yes, there's a fair few, but football and then rugby union. That's your two major sports in London, because of the Harlequins and Twickenham. Anyway, that's Harlequins is in the Twickenham district. It's right by the Stoop, and Twickenham itself is right by Twickenham train station, so, which is not actually that far from Wimbledon. So you have that kind of sporting heart of southwest London. You've got Epsom Racecourse, you've got Kempton Park, you've got Sandown. They're all in the southwest of London. There's horse race as well. There's horse racing fans. So there's it's not just football that's a popular sport in London. Brands Hatch Motorsport, that's only in Kent. That's not too far outside of London as well. So there's a lot of motorsport fans in the southeast that would either go to Thruxton, Castle Combe, or Brands Hatch. Although Thruxton and Brands Hatch are closer to London than Castle Combe. So there's motorsport as well, that will attract fans in the southeast in London as well. So there's definitely um, there's definitely more than just football. Football is the dominant, but it's not the only sport that will attract fans by any stretch. And I think this is why the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball have all at various points come to London. Now the NFL still does, and the other sports have done, and there's clearly a reason for that. And and the NHL has been to the UK as well. They've worked out that it's not football isn't the only sport that is popular. They've worked out there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of fans of these other sports in various locations. So if you go to Sheffield, there's a lot of ice hockey fans. Go to Nottingham, there's a lot of ice hockey fans. Same with Belfast. And the NHL has been to these locations. You look at Sheffield as a city; it's a sportsman city. So yeah, there's definitely there's definitely things to consider. Yes. Oh, Lee, my work colleagues on it. Yeah, Arsenal. There's a lot of my friends who live in Bratton, which is where I used to live, are Arsenal and Spurs fans. There's a lot of Chelsea fans there as well. Um, most of the football fans there are from the London clubs, and I say London clubs because that's a plural definition. Because almost every London club I've seen at least one jersey of the London clubs, and it's to do with obviously when um, post World War Two, when we were rebuilding all the bombed cities, a lot of people moved outside London to the home counties, to the new housing estates, and these small villages and towns exploded in size, like Milton Keynes, like Bracknell, like Hemel Hempstead, like Stevenage, Crawley, Slough, and so they took their football fandom with them. So, and their kids and grandkids have obviously grown up in those households saying, "I'm an Arsenal fan, I'm a Chelsea fan, Fulham, Brentford, Tottenham, Palace, Spurs, you know, Charlton, sorry, Wimbledon, QPR. So I've seen almost every single West Ham. There's a lot of West Ham fans actually as well where I used to live. A lot of West Ham fans. Um, Even Leighton Orient, I've seen Leighton Orient as well. So every London club is represented in the home counties. But traditionally, as well, from outside London looking in, there always has been people. But it's an interesting one because when you're trying to build your own local identity with your own local football or rugby club, and then you've got a bigger urban area literally just there. But it's the same in North America as well, where you will have um, like New York, the Rangers and the Islanders will draw in fans from outside the city of New York. Um, when it was the Phoenix Coyotes, not the Arizona Coyotes, you would have fans who've been drawn in from other areas in the Phoenix metropolitan area. The LA Kings and Anaheim Ducks, they actually bring in fans from other parts of the LA metropolitan area that are different cities and towns and communities that come under the wider metropolitan area, but they're not classed as Los Angeles, San Bernardino, or um, you know, and such forth. Like the San Francisco 49ers and what were the Oakland Raiders, now Vegas Raiders, they would bring in fans into the Bay Area, the wider Bay Area. Um, so there is that. But then when you are like a one club town, so, you've only got the one professional team, like Swindon, for example, or Exeter, where you haven't got to sort of split your fan base with another team in the same sport, makes things kind of easier. Um, to have a solid fan base where you don't have to compete with another rival club for those fans. Um, like Newcastle United, like Sunderland, they're one club towns. They are the big boys in town. So 95% of your fan base is going to be from that metropolitan area. You're going to sell out your stadium week in, week out because it's the community kind of buying. Um, Whereas in Manchester or Greater Manchester, because there's a lot of clubs in Greater Manchester, um, Merseyside, because you've got more than just Liverpool and Everton on Merseyside. You've got to compete for your fans a little bit. You've got to split the cities, sort of split. Bristol, Rovers and City. London, you've got multiple clubs. Um, and there is some geography to it, but there's that wider, well, families moved out of London, but they still commute in, and it's one of them. Yeah, Swindon, I don't really know because Swindon used to be a Premier League club and they have won silverware in their history and their existence. So I wouldn't say Swindon, the fan base, would support another club. No, I would say in Swindon you are a Swindon fan with maybe some fans of some of the other clubs in the Premier League, maybe littered around because the kids at school. I would say Swindon Town, the fan base is Swindon. Um, Whether the whole town is interested in football is another thing because you've got the ice hockey team and obviously outside of Swindon the area is quite rural. Um, and so you might have the catchment area of Wiltshire could be Swindon, you know, and then the surrounding area, or the little villages. I wouldn't say, but Swindon is quite a sizable location with a sizable population, but it's in the middle of nowhere. That's the thing. Um, Swindon's it is in the middle of nowhere. That's fact. Um, but there's some interesting, like Southampton, for example. It's one club town. Portsmouth, one club town. Bournemouth, one club town. Brighton, one club town. They did, um, so that makes it an interesting dynamic where it's a one sport, one club kind of dynamic. Whereas Swindon does have other sports played in Swindon. Bristol is not just a one sport town. Exeter's not really a one sport town. Um, and so you do have to compete a certain amount with another sport, but that other sport, those fans will still support the town. So it doesn't matter who the team is. The sport, you've got that kind of support behind you, where you can be a Swindon Wildcats fan and a Swindon Town fan, and go do two matches in a weekend, and possibly the same day if both teams are at home. So you could go watch Swindon Town on a lunchtime kickoff, um, or a 3 o'clock kickoff, and in the evening go to the ice hockey game. Or on the Saturday you watch Swindon Town at home, and then on the Sunday you go down the Link Centre and watch Swindon Wildcats play insert team here, or vice versa. Saturday it's the home game. Sunday you might have a Sunday lunchtime kickoff. That kind of thing. So you, places like that, you're lucky. Very very lucky. Other places not so much. Like Bristol, it's one or the other. You won't have a relative who supports the other Rovers in City because you just can talk to each other. um, but I'm not surprised that rugby fans in Sweden are mostly Bath supporters if they are rugby fans because they're the nearest professional rugby union side. They are. Bath is not as far away as Reading, so when London Irish are playing in Reading, and then you've got Bristol, which is a natural rivalry between Swindon and Bristol that goes back quite a long way when it comes to the communities. So it doesn't surprise me that is a natural um, catchment area for Bath Rugby Club. Would have that catchment area because Bristol's just up the road. So that's an interesting one. But no, there's some interesting things in regards to fan catchment areas, and I've spoken this at length about the congested sports market that the UK is, and certain areas are less disposable income than others. So the area I live in now has a higher disposable income than, let's say, Swindon, not Swindon, Somerset, for example, or Devon. The average disposable income is higher here um, and such. Bath could attract more fans if they had, yeah, but possibly if the rep was bigger, yes. It also would help if they could win more because they're not very good right now and they've got a losing record. But that's another thing. Winning will also help you attract more fans. It's fact. Unless you've got a really good kind of way of setting good PR department, selling yourself, positivity. Even if in defeat, you're still developing young talent. You're creating a lot of interest. That can help, but winning helps. Um, that would help attract more fans. But Bath itself, A, is a smaller location. It's a smaller city. Population size. It's a wealthy city. Not get ourselves wrong here. There's a lot of disposable income in Bath, but it's a smaller city, and so therefore you already have that limited catchment area anyway. Population, um, and so your catchment area you'd have to really stretch it out to try and draw fans in, and then that there's that problem. Um, well, Swindon have been a Premier League club back in the day, so they've been in the top flight. They've won silverware. It's just they haven't been well run for the last 25, nearly 30 years, and that is a problem. It's not that they they could be a championship side. They could be a Premier League side. They have been. It's the direction the club has taken and some of the decisions on a financial level taken, some of the transfers and some of the decisions with managers taken since they were a Premier League side that have undone Swindon, and that have caused problems for Swindon. So, and this is what happens to any club that they get relegated. You want to get back to the league you're in as quickly as possible, or stabilise in the league you're in before building again to go back up. And that's something Swindon haven't done, is been stable. Been stable. They've definitely given it a go in the top flights. There's not knock them for that. It's the stability off the field, which has then affected the stability on the field with squad selection, transfer policy, scouting, recruitment, financial dealings, the structures off the field. Ownership has had another issue because they've had financial issues. But no, they could definitely get back to the championship. Like that should be a lot of a medium term objective, but I think anyone who comes into the current ownership should be looking at the history of the club and going, well, we've been in the Premier League before, we should try and get back to the top flight again as a long term objective, and then aiming to win the cup, the FA Cup or League Cup as a competition in the next, let's say, 30 years, up 20 years. And so there's that. You're surprised that Widnes have an ice hockey team, for a rugby team. I'm not. I'm not at all. The fact that neither the rugby league team, or the ice hockey team are very good is another thing. But it's the culture. It's the contact nature. It's the grafting nature of the sport, which appeals to a working class community. That hard nosed, blue collar, grafting kind of nature of what these sports are about. Um, and then you look at the history of these sports and the working class origins of them. That doesn't surprise me. The fact that the Widnes haven't been a very good team for a while is nothing. The Widnes Vikings and the Widnes ice hockey team, indifferent. But it doesn't surprise me because of the working class nature of the sport that it is, and the fact that it is a sports mad location doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And to be fair, the north of England, rugby league and ice hockey are actually very, very popular sports. Very popular sports. Because of the working class natures and the origins of them. Do I think the EIHL could be bigger? I think stability of the league has been an issue, and stability of teams within the league has been an issue. The only way it could be bigger is if facilities are improved. We've lost rinks rather than gained them in recent years. So, and teams that have taken that step up from the second level, which was the EPIHL, which then became the national league, to the elite league, teams have struggled financially. Basingstoke and Milton Keynes will tell you that it's not always the right decision to go up a level, and then teams have gone bust. The Stingrays from Hull and obviously Manchester have had money problems, and the Vipers from Newcastle. So it would be nice, but the Edinburgh Capitals, there's been money issues with certain teams. So you've got to have that financial viability, which I think is there, but you've got to have the arenas to do it. And either you bring in minimum arena sizes, which I think then will then prevent teams from taking that step up, or we have rink investment where we actually invest in building new ones and upgrading and maintaining the ones we have. So it could be, but it's then down to the powers that be to make it happen. And unfortunately, it's a very expensive sport to run, and it's very expensive to maintain the facilities required for the sport to be played. And that's something at the moment with the economics the country's facing, that we do not have a lot of spare cash around to fund a refurb of an ice rink or building a new one or expanding on what we have. Where's the money going to come from? So in theory, yes. Practicality, it's going to have to wait a while, unless they're very, very brave and go to the National League sides and go, okay, well, here you go. And unfortunately, I don't think enough of the facilities we have are of a decent enough standard and of a big enough capacity to really make it financially viable long term. But there's nothing to say that they can't go, oh, we'll make things better, but then you've got to find the money to pay the players. And the league has got to make money. They've got to have a decent media rights deal that's better than what they've got. That means ticket prices will have to go up. They've got to pay the players, and then you've got to try to attract good talent to come to the league. I wouldn't say it isn't really going to happen. It's just the fact of stability, and we need a better governing body. We need a more unified governing body. Unfortunately, yes, having a smaller league means you're going to play each other more often. Um, but even if you were to expand it, there's only a couple of teams with financial clout which are going to be the ones at the top all the time, and that is the Steelers, the Giants, and the Panthers. It's fact. It is fact. Maybe you get a Cardiff Devils that pop in there every now and then and have a good season, but that is the realistic fact. That even if you had a 20-team league and you went to the National League, okay, we're going to have all your teams in, even though with the smaller arenas, it still would be the same 3 or 4 teams regularly at the top every season because they've got the financial backing for it. I could never support Guildford. I have sanity and dignity, and that would be interesting if I walked into the Spectrum wearing a Bees jersey, going, oh, "Okay, they've moved, but can I support your team, please?" No, it doesn't work like that. I would happily watch a game at the Spectrum as just as a fan, but couldn't do it. Could not do it to myself. And my friends would disown me on in a joking way. They would decide, but I would happily go to the Spectrum and watch a game. Yeah, to wear a Guildford Flames jersey, I'd rather gouge my eyes out. But then again, that was me going to the Bracknell Ice Rink for 25 years passionately, um, plus 28 years pretty much. Um, and there was a good 10-year period where I went pretty much every weekend to watch games. Um, that would be basically me going, I'm gouging my eyes out. I feel, and I wouldn't feel right if that makes sense. Um, and and vice versa. I mean, Guildford fans would be like, would feel the same way. The biggest rivals, just no, you just don't do it. But no, I mean, I, I, I still love the sport. I'm still passionate about the sport. I just feel that, unfortunately, yes, the pandemic hasn't helped, but even before the pandemic, there were a lot of problems with the governance and the finances of the sport, which is why it's a minority sport. They do need a better media rights deal. They do need some better financing, some better sponsors. But still, even so, there's only a handful of teams that are financially competitive, and and money makes a massive difference in a sport like ice hockey. Massive difference, much bigger difference than in other sports. Like football, you can get away with having a bit less money if you've got really good scouting, and you can encourage your players to stay for a hometown discount, even though they get paid 10, let's say, twice as much at a rival club. If you've got the right ethos, you can, because they're still well paid. They're still making a lot of money. Whereas ice hockey, that wage differential where they can go, okay, here's your. How big of a newspaper is Football.London in the UK? No, never really heard of them. And I would say that I'm more likely to get sports news on the Athletic as a website than pick it up. But I live outside London, so to me it doesn't really impact me. I'm not sure what the readership is, but newspapers have got a declining readership anyway. Um, I would say like West Ham and Arsenal fan TVs, for example, on YouTube. They're the two fan TV YouTube channels that I subscribe to, just for like the banter and listening to what And I think there's the Flying Pig United and She Devils United. They're Man United fan channel. There's a couple of fan channels that I subscribe to just so I can get a gauge of what fan bases are feeling, and it's kind of interesting because I've gained some of my subscribers from some of these fan channels. And I pop in there to go, look, I'm not a West Ham fan. I'm just a neutral here. But listening to your conversations giving me a gauge of where you guys are at and how you feel as a fan base, because it's interesting when like as with my channel, I mean, listening to all the various fan bases. I've got Newcastle fan channels that I subscribe to as well. Um, And it's interesting when you listen to some of the fan bases. And I just stumbled across like the Flying Pig United. I stumbled across by accident. Um, and he does some EA Sports, FIFA content as well. But I stumbled across it by pure accident. He'll probably be doing a live stream at some point tomorrow in regards to the defeat to Arsenal. I stumbled across it by accident during the Mason Greenwood situation, when Mason Greenwood was first dropped from the team in regards to the police charges, the criminal investigation he's facing. Um, and I think the Solskjaer situation as well. I think I popped into one of his streams by accident. I'll have a listen. And it's very interesting. So look, I'm not a Man United fan. I'm just looking at it from the outside in as a neutral, as someone just wanting to get as much information from the fan base to when I'm making a judgment on the situation, how the fans feel when I'm making my content. And that's what I do. I pop into these fan channels because I have passionate fans who will be asking the questions or being interviewed. And they're like, well, this is giving me an idea of how the fan base feels. So when I'm like, oh, the fan base is a bit divided on this. There's some for and against the manager or the ownership or how the team playing and the patience. Some fan bases are less patient than others. Some fan bases are more, I wouldn't say toxic, but more passionate in a sense when the team isn't doing as well. They're more vocal. Um, so it is interesting from that point of view. And it's exactly the same when I look at, um, for example, the hockey guy. For example, he basically the video he did today on the Bruce Boudreau sacking and the Rick Tocchet hiring. He was more without back in the day. This was like 2016, 2017. He was dropping f bombs throughout that entire video. Obviously, the channel's matured. He's actually making money. It's his livelihood now, so he's not dropping the f bombs. But you could tell he was pissed off, really, really pissed off, and passionate about it. And so, a normal video like that, where a coach or a player is traded, or there's a coach sacked or GM sacked, it's a good 10 minutes shorter. He's made the video a little bit shorter. That was only half an hour. We're very passionate, and he does every team in the league. So this is not. He's become a lot less biased. But when it's his favourite teams like Vancouver, Dallas, Boston, the passion's more there. You can see this is a guy who is furious with how the organisation has acted in this regard, and how they treated the outgoing coach. The new incoming coach is going to have a real hard time winning the fan base over. The players maybe just, I don't think the players are going to be won over easily either. So Rick Tockett's in for a difficult time. I feel sorry for him and I feel sorry for Bruce Boudreau, but the way the organisation has acted in this regard is not great. And that's borne out with how Shannon Scames is his real name, but the hockey guy has reacted to that. And it's not a good look for the Canucks organisation. I don't think he did such a good job in impartial coverage. No, I think he's a little bit more impartial to Vancouver than he used to be, and Dallas and Boston. I think he's more impartial than what he used to be with his three favourite teams. But I think with this one, his impartiality, rightly, I think he's put that aside. I think he's rightly annoyed with the organisation because he goes to Vancouver games, he goes to the Abbotsford Canucks as well. He is a match day goer. He goes there, he buys the merchandise, he supports the team passionately, which is why he has the channel partly because they, I think it was the Matthews draft that he really exploded into popularity in 2016, and he was wearing the ugly Vancouver hat. And if it isn't for Vancouver, having some bad drafting and some bad trading in the last 5-6 years, he doesn't have a channel. But he is very impartial. But you can see his frustration with the organisation in this regard. When you look at the number of head coaches they've had, they've not been relevant since Alan Vigneault, so pre-Tortorella. The Tortorella hiring was the wrong guy for the job. If anything, Tortorella should have been there when Mark Crawford or Vigneault was hired. Go back about 5 years, 6 years, and that's the Tortorella moment. They came 5, 6 years too late to put Tortorella in, and that's had a knock-on impact on where the team is today. So 2013, 2014 is the moment when things are going wrong here, and the organisation under the Aquilinis are in this position, and then you've got to look at the general manager situation as well. And yes, mistakes were made by Jim Benning towards the end. First season to Jim Benning's general manager, I think the right decisions were made. But then you have to closer now to winning a Stanley Cup than the 3 Stanley Cup finals they were in. And the last one was 12 years ago. And I remember that riot very well. I remember the 94 riot as well. News. So the team is going backwards, and the way they've dealt with a very situation like this has been poor. I'm surprised Boudreau didn't decide to resign. I think he was very committed to the players he had to work with and the backroom staff he had. And I think the organisation's learning now. They could have said to him, right, you're going to stay for a season and a half. Let's just get through this transitional period and then we're going to bring someone else in. If they had stated that, I think he would have been happy to do the job. The way, especially how this season's gone, how they just hung him out on a fish hook, that's not good. And for last week, we've known he's getting the sack and Tocquette's going to go. What is interesting is Travis Green and Rick Tocchet were both involved in that gambling ring, the Operation Slapshot. They were both implicated, which is really, really interesting. I was on a video on Operation Slapshot and the corruption scandal and the betting scandal and the betting ring. And that is really interesting that Travis Green was a player at the time and Rick Tocchet was an assistant at the Arizona Coyotes at the time. They're both implicated in this gambling ring, which is betting on NFL games, but they're both, sucked into that. And in between, what Bruce Boudreau is the coach in between. He just couldn't make that up. But no, it's not a good time. It's not a good look for the organisation. I feel sorry for Boudreau. I actually feel sorry for Rick Tocchet having to come into a situation that's clearly very toxic, where the dressing room may not warm to him, the fan base may not warm to him, and then he may be in the same situation next season or the season after, where he's the one getting booted out, and then his replacement's already been lined up. It's all a little bit, not particularly. It's not been well done. It's not been well handled. It does leave a bit of taste in the mouth. I will agree with that. I don't think it's been well handled. And of course, there's going to be Rick Tocchet may go by Brock Besser. By all that, thank you for your service. You're getting traded down. Now, whether the GM wants, Alvin wants to do that is another thing. But Tocchet may go, I don't. These players, this is how I want to fix the team. You've got to help me fix this team. You have a request? Yes, absolutely. There'll be the last question I deal with because I do have to get up. It's already 10 to 10 my time in the evening. So it's 9:50 in the evening my time. So bearing in mind, I'm 8 hours ahead of you. So it's 1, 2 o'clock your time. I need to get up at work. Have you watched the American sports YouTuber Behind the Line? He hates everything woke. I don't agree with most of what he says, but his rants are funny. I find things like Steve Dangler and things like that really annoying because it's so over the top and clearly very scripted. Whether they're you can go through the NHL standings and say who is still under shot clubs. Anyone in the top 3 of their division. So I would say the Pacific. I don't think the Stanley Cup winner comes from the Pacific. I know the Oilers are on a little bit of a hot streak in Vegas of wobbling, but the Seattle Kraken are having a decent season. I think they could possibly be a dark horse, but not the Stanley Cup winner is not coming from the Pacific. I would say the Central. I think Dallas have overachieved. The Jets, even on the Jets fan, I think having bonus behind the bench, I think has made a massive change. I feel sorry for Lowry and what he's given to the organisation. The fact his son Adam is still playing is fantastic. Playoff shot, I would say the Pacific, I think, is the weakest of the 4 divisions. That's already been proven by stats, let alone points. What teams have actually acquired in points. No, the Senators, I think, have left themselves too much to do. And I think I think DJ Smith, his and oh God, the GM. Um, who's the GM again? Um, I think the coach and GM both could be out of a job by the end of the season. Bearing in mind that the team's up for sale, they've underachieved this season. Uh, there are some teams that aren't making the playoffs, and we're just over halfway through. We're not even at the All-Star break, and there's teams you can definitely say are not making it. I think Philadelphia may be a dark horse to go in, and Pittsburgh may miss out. I think the Penguins, the injuries to the Penguins are taking their toll, and Tortorella's doing something at Philly that he wasn't meant to do. Well, the Maple Leafs win a playoff game. They win many playoff games. They just can't win a round. Problem with the Maple Leafs is they will win. You know, if it's like if the series is if the series, let's say, is on game 5, they're okay. If the series is going to game 6 or game 7, it's a pressure game, so if they can win, they have to win to stay in the playoffs. They lose. So if it's a game 6 or a game 7, they tend to lose game 6 or game 7, and it has catastrophic impacts on getting out the first round. They haven't got out the first round in a long time. I think who was the goalkeeper? No, it was a goalie. Ed Balfour. Eddie the Eagle was the last goalie to win a playoff series for Toronto. There you go. And there's no active players left in the NHL who were active at the time they last won a round. Fleury was drafted the year they last won a round. So that's yeah, it's 20 years. There are no active players in the NHL. Yager is now overseas, and Fleury was drafted the year they last won a round, 2003. That was the last time they got out the first round. They won playoff games in that time, and obviously they spent a bit of time out the playoffs. But there's no active players in the NHL. Ed Balfour was a goaltender at the time. Eddie the Eagle was the last goaltender around with the Maple. So yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, they can win playoff games. They can win at least 3 playoff games. They need to win 4 to win a round, and they haven't won a round for 20 years. Um, they've had some great regular seasons as well. That's what's really bizarre is they've been really consistent in the last 4 or 5 years in the league. Really consistent, making the playoffs. But Jesus Christ, the problem is the fan base is too loyal. The fan base, they will sell out week in, week out. They will support failure. That's the problem. The team is profitable even when the team is crap. That is the issue. And the Howard Ballard era, they're making a film. They made a film about that. But the old owner of the 70s and 80s, who was really bad. Like, he was a sleazy, corrupt character. They made a film about him. The team had a shocking record for 20, 30 years. And fans kept selling out, Maple Leaf Gardens. They aired Canada Centre in tonight. They had some good teams in the late 80s, early 90s. They finally made conference finals. They got close to making a Stanley Cup final um, with Felix Potvin and things like that, and Cujo, Curtis Joseph. They had their moments, and then they didn't. And the problem is the fans keep turning out. They really do. They really do. The fans keep turning up for the Maple Leafs. Now, regular season, they're fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Postseason, they're hopeless. And that is the problem. They will make the playoffs and do nothing. And I think at some point, ownership has got to go, right, why is this? And then we look at the Shanna plan. Lou Lamoriello out, Shanahan in, now Carl Dubas. And we have to look at, you can't put a team together by pure analytics alone. Look at the numbers, because there's no tough guy. I mean, Wayne Simmons is a tough guy, but he's not the toughest guy. I mean, he's so, weight division. You cannot win with pure data and analytics. It's an analytical GM. Does not work. And I think if they fail to get out first round this year, GM, coach, done. I do. I really, really do. And then do they go a full rebuild, or do they just add a couple of pieces by trading a few pieces? Because a lot of their salary cap is with like 4 or 5 players, and that is a problem. They're spending a lot of money on a handful of players, and Mana, Nylander, Matthews, Tavares. There's another player, someone else they're paying a lot of money for. The goaltending as well. They're paying a bit of money for the goaltending, not too much, but a bit. But 4 or 5 players up front, or in the defence up front, they're tied in. Their top 2 lines pretty much 65% of their cap or something. And they're in salary cap hell. But before the salary cap era, they were throwing money around. So were the Rangers, and they couldn't win anything. So money doesn't buy you success. But when you are salary cap constrained, you're limited the amount of money you can spend on it in the season. That then hampers you if you're signed to some place, big contracts. And if the salary cap's not going up by much, you're in trouble. So you can't balance out the team. You can't bring in certain elements that you need in order to win. You need toughness. You need grit and determination. They've got the skill, but they haven't got the toughness. And so the goaltending's been an issue, but I think they've sorted that regular season, yes. Postseason, been a problem. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very, very much. It's now 10 p.m. my time. Most of you are from the UK reviewing anyway, but I'm going to call it an evening. Thank you very, very much for all the questions that have been put to me this evening. And we'll have to see, like Everton, the Frank Lampard situation, how long has he got? I mean, he's got to be running out of time there. What's going on with Chelsea and Liverpool? Will Jurgen Klopp, does there need to be a refresh there? Has he taken that team as far as he can? Do they really need to have a full clear out in the summer and refresh the squad, for the following seasons? Okay, this season's a write-off. You might give the FA Cup a go, but this season's a write-off kind of thing. Chelsea, Graham Potter, will he have a full? Will he be there for the full summer transfer window? Are the signings Chelsea are making right now, are they panic buys, like the Murdoch signing, where Arsenal were all in it? That kind of thing. Man United losing again. So they beat Man City, lose to Arsenal. No, they're not. In the hunt for Premier League? No, they're not. I don't think they're there yet. I think Ten Hag, there still needs to be squad changes and changes made. There's still a few players in the team that I think need to be moved on, and players have brought in and look at that youth roster, bring through the youth talent they were being famous for. I think De Gea, I think he's on the way out, personally. This is me. But anyway, from me, thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.